I would encourage more women to tell their stories more, such that people can tell their stories.
Good day, I'm Oletilwe Ramashala, the guest presenter for this month's Heritage Special Edition of the Executive Leadership Magazine, and it is truly an honor to introduce you to our very own CEO of Sanlam Corporate, a lady that I most admire in the industry, and you'll later know why. We'll be diving into her vision, her leadership journey, and the role of Sanlam Corporate that it plays in shaping financial confidence for South Africans' workforce. Sis Kanyisa, let me begin by saying, Kolisa, but I am so excited and honored that you actually agreed to do this. I know you're a very private person, but thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
No, it's good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity today. And you're right, it's not my favorite, but it is a topic that I'm very passionate about. This country, what it looks like for the people of this country to have comfortable lives, but also a comfortable retirement. So I'm looking forward to the engagement today.
I'm glad. Let's get right into it, Sis. As a CEO of Sanlam Corporate,
yes,
what is your long-term vision for shaping financial confidence in today's South Africa's workforce?
Yeah. So my vision is very much linked to and tied to Sanlam's broader vision. And what we've communicated out into the market is we are building a financially confident South Africa. And when we start to frame that, for us, it means a South Africa where every family, every member, every customer, every community feels empowered and is healthy. I think in SA, we have really, really good financial solutions. I think we have solutions that deliver the outcomes that they need to. But I think the challenge that we have in this country is our solutions are at the same time incredibly complex. Right. So when we think about how we can start to do better and get people to that place where they're financially confident, what it looks like for us inside of Sanlam Corporate is taking a step back and thinking how we can simplify not only just our solutions, but our processes, simplify the way that we communicate and engage to members so that they can start to feel a sense of trust and a sense of empowerment in the South African financial system.
That's so true. And trust goes a long way. And I think it ties in really nicely, Sis Kanyisa, in terms of the question that I have next.
Okay.
Retirement. Something that I'm deeply passionate about. I've got two parents who are who are teachers, right?
Yeah.
And I know from experience that retirement outcomes remain a pressing national concern.
Sure.
Because, the reality of what they have what they've saved towards their retirement sometimes can be a shock. So in your view, how can the industry play a stronger role in terms of narrowing the gap between what members expect and the reality they face at retirement?
I want to start by saying that the retirement industry has actually gone quite a long way to closing out quite a lot of the gaps that we've experienced and have been lamenting over the past 40, 30, 50 years. I think what I've really, really enjoyed about our industry is the tight collaboration between the policymakers, the providers, the advisors, employers, as it relates to, if there is a retirement crisis, what are some of the changes that we need to make? I look at, the really sort of quite significant steps that we've taken from a retirement fund reform perspective. And I do think while we're not where we need to be, we're certainly making progress in the right direction.
That's true.
I think the work that needs to be done, it goes back to that comment I made earlier just around member engagement and member empowerment. A lot of people find it still to today quite complicated to understand what is going on around their savings and how to make different decisions so that they can improve their position. So it's a lot of the focus of the industry. Every single board of trustees that I speak to, their main priority now is just around member engagement, education, really embedding financial literacy. And so I think that there's work that we can do collaboratively across, National Treasury, across providers, ASISA, employers, just to think about, how we strengthen that component. I think there's also a very, very real condition as it relates to affordability, right? And that's not something that we can shy away from. That a lot of people just simply don't have enough to be able to save.
That's true.
Enough. And so that is something that we also need to lean into. We do a lot of work in our business just around when we think about people's pay slips. What are the levers that we can pull that can create space for more savings? We've got a big emphasis in terms of medical aid and the expenses related to medical aid and how we can have a systematic and structural impact on the cost of claims, as an example. So those are things that we are working very, very hard on. We continue to modernize our business, simplify our operations so that we can reduce our costs and pass on those savings to members so that they can get into a better place as it relates to being able to achieve some of their retirement outcomes and goals.
That's so true, Sis Kanyisa. And touching on empowering and educating people in terms of getting them to that financial confidence at retirement, right? Our Sanlam benchmark is something that we pride ourselves in, right? It's much anticipated in the industry because there's a lot of industry research that goes into it. What role does research of this nature play in your thoughts in shaping policy and driving financial literacy within South Africa?
I think you've already answered the question for me. We really do see the work that we do as a catalyst. We want to start engagements that provoke significant decisions as it relates to the direction of policy. We want to make the work accessible. We wanted to reach policymakers. We wanted to reach employers. We wanted to reach significant funds. We wanted to reach members, right? And so we try to keep the research human. We keep it very, very simple, and we try to communicate with clarity. And we've been doing the research for over 45 years. And it is a lot of the insights that we have been able to deliver out into the market that have driven much of what we've seen from a reform perspective. I am so proud of that work. I'm proud that it was quoted by my clients. I am proud that it was quoted by my competitors.
Yes.
Right. As long as it is moving us in the right direction, it is creating empowerment, it is creating direction, and it is provoking thought and leadership.
Now, talking about, empowering and, providing that insight, one of the deputy POs of one of the funds actually said they love the stories behind the data, which is what you're talking about, the human element to it, right? It sinks in really nicely to the next question that I'm going to ask about the two-pot system. That was being much anticipated in the industry, right?
Yes.
And it's brought massive changes, Sis Kanyisa. What opportunities and risks do you see in its implementation?
So the two-pot system, I don't have other words to describe it outside of it being polarizing. Right? You've got people that either love it or they hate it. And I personally think the two-pot system and the legislation behind that system is a very important milestone and an intentional and deliberate compromise, right?
Yeah.
I think the thing that has hampered retirement in this country more than any other thing is the low levels of preservation when people move between employers. That has been a biggest problem statement for decades.
That's true.
People will simply move between employers and they would take whatever they had saved as cash and do with it whatever they wanted to do. Some made good choices, other people made poor choices. But what we've been able to do through the two-pot system is really drive up compulsory preservation. And that is a major, major win, which over time we will start to see as it relates to bigger asset values building up and getting people into a much better position as it relates to saving for retirement.
So true.
But on the other side of it is the fact that we've also said that people can have access to a portion of their retirement without having to leave their work. And this access is created through an emergency pot, right? Where we've recognized that life sometimes simply happens.
It does.
Right? And people need some access to whatever they've been able to save. Most people only save through their retirement fund.
Sure.
And so the access to the emergency savings is us as an industry and as a set of policymakers recognizing that sometimes those things, they absolutely happen. I think the work that we need to do, based on the experience that we saw from about September last year when the two-pot system did come into place, is as an industry, as employers, as service providers, as policymakers, there's a gap as it relates to members' understandings around the impact of accessing that emergency savings when you're not in an emergency.
That's true.
Right. We need to really curtail and limit, I want to say, abuse of those emergency pots, because ultimately that emergency pot is still very much part of your retirement savings, right? And that it is not supposed to be consumed on a frequent or regular basis, such as a transactional bank account. It is alongside your retirement pot, your plan for 40 years' time. And the access is only there for the most dire and the most severe emergencies.
That's true. That's true. And I think you touched on something that I almost want to re-emphasize, that your retirement savings is the largest sum of money that most people will ever receive in their life. So you're right in terms of compulsive preservation is necessary.
Yes.
And that people should be very aware that it's not, I just want to tap into it for the sake of it. When life happens, if necessary, do and, tap into it. Now, digital transformation is reshaping every industry.
Yes.
And in the financial services and insurance sector as well, it's become truly a game changer. How is Sanlam Corporate harnessing digital transformation and data to enhance its customer value proposition and strengthen financial confidence?
So I would say that our two foremost priorities inside of Sanlam Corporate are that those elements that I mentioned earlier about member education and member engagement, and two, being able to enhance ease of doing business with Sanlam Corporate, whether you're a member or an intermediary or an employer.
That's
right?
True.
So we are leaning into digitization and automation as part of how we will satisfy those two priorities. I think being able to engage via apps, member portals, WhatsApp, creates an opportunity for us to reach larger audiences in a much more efficient and accessible way, right? And so we've been driving digitization and digital adoption as part of how we want to engage our members. I think the other thing that you get through leveraging technology is you can get to a better member intimacy, right? You understand better. You've got more data about the member. And so how you communicate is a lot more empathetic, it's a lot more relevant, and it recognizes the circumstances and the preferences of that member. So that's what we're thinking about there. And we really do want to make it simpler and easier to simply engage with us. I think our ability to service is a critical priority for us. And we are also leveraging these tools such that you can have at the touch of a button and in your pocket a way to connect and engage with us around whatever it is you might need. If it is a question around how to submit a claim, if it is a question around how to increase your contributions, all of that in our context is done through our app.
Wow. The most favorite part of this podcast is really leaning into the woman behind the role. I've told you so many times, and I mean it from the depth of my heart, you're truly an inspiration to me. And I know that I speak for the future young upcoming, leaders who one day wish to occupy the seat that you have as a CEO.
Okay.
I've done my research and a bit of stalking, so you'll forgive me here. But I know that you're both an actuary from UCT and an MBA graduate from Columbia Business School. How has your academics journey shaped your leadership style?
Okay. So this is probably the most cringe part of the conversation for me. I don't like to talk about myself. Um, but if I had to answer the question, so I'm a terrible actuary. Okay. Um, but I think in a couple of words or sentences, I think my actuarial qualification helped me as it relates to being able to answer questions better, right? How to organize information, how to work through fact patterns and thought patterns,
Sure.
and solve problems, right? I think the MBA portion of it helped me as it relates to being able to ask better questions.
Wow.
Right. And I think the combination has been helpful in the context of leading an organization, solving problems, but also identifying the most critical problems that clients and members and customers face. So I think it has been helpful for me in those two respects, because it's trained my mind to do two very different but equally important things.
I love that. Now I understand the secret behind Mrs. Kanyisa.
Sure.
Next question is what has been your most defining challenge as a young female CEO? Now I know that seat looks very admirable, but I'm sure it's quite hot at certain times. And how did you then navigate these challenges?
Yo, I suppose on the defining challenge, I would have spoken about this before, so I apologize to all of those who've heard me speak and who are going to find this portion a little bit repetitive. I was particularly challenged by the pandemic and leading through the pandemic. So I took on my current role as CEO of Sanlam Corporate in September 2020.
Sure.
Right. And I walked into an empty building where everyone was working from home. I was tasked with leading the number one group risk book in the country. And if you followed the pandemic, and if you were a pandemic denialist, there were potentially maybe 3 places that you couldn't hide the pandemic from. The one was the hospitals, the second were the mortuaries, and the third were insurance companies, right? Because those were the places where there was an impact. I think in the balance of that year and in the year that followed, we saw the biggest crisis that this business has ever seen in terms of the volumes of claims and the impact from a profitability perspective. We made significant losses.
Sure.
I think it had an impact operationally on the business, right? Because we had never seen that much by way of death and fatalities. And so even my people who were responsible for administering and paying the claims and engaging with the clients, I think they also were impacted by it in the context of their work, but also in the context of their personal lives. Everyone was around people that were dying. So I think we had operational and psychological trauma in our business, financial trauma in the business. But it was also a time where I probably learned the most about work, about how to lead people through crisis, and about how to keep promises.
Wow.
Right? Because that's what people ask us to do. And we collect their premiums over many years and we promise them that if anything were to ever happen, we would show up for them and we would look after their family. So I was very, very proud to have been able to be part of something like that. But I guess as a new CEO, fairly young CEO, it was extremely challenging to have been going through a crisis like that at that point in time. And I mean, I was new to my team. And I do want to use this opportunity to express gratitude to the people that I worked with who rallied behind me. I learned in that time that there is a leadership in followership.
Wow.
Right? Sure. How you follow someone can be the most leadership that you can show us. So those people followed me and they didn't know me.
Sure.
And they trusted me and they supported and guided me as I was walking ahead of them.
Sure. There's leadership and fellowship. Wow, that's so profound, Sis Kanyisa. You mentioned your actuarial science,
Yes.
helping you with problem-solving skills, right? So how do you balance the technical expertise and the MBA that you touched on with the empathy? So I think, how do you balance technical expertise with the need for empathy and people-centered leadership?
Right. So I think it's a component of my technical background that I think data should definitely guide and drive decisions, but action is taken through people, right? So people drive impact. So I think it's quite important to have a combination of these two things. I've learned that you can come up with the best possible plan based on the numbers and the data and insights, but it will take people and their commitment and buy into the plan to be able to make any kind of progress. So I think for me, it's the data, but your ability to influence, to gain support, and to win over people, and for them to also buy in to whichever path that you're taking them on. And people buy in from a place of purpose and meaning. Everyone wants to do something that will have a positive impact.
That's so true. I know that you've also led across product strategy and distribution roles.
Sure.
Those are quite tough roles to actually embark on.
Sure.
What leadership principles remain constant for you across these shifts?
It's clarity, particularly clarity of purpose. Why are we doing this? So people, you need to give people a why.
Yeah.
And having a very clear why helps you when things are very challenging, when energy is low, when complexity is high, right? So knowing why you're doing it is quite important. I think at a personal level, principles, philosophies, or attributes that remain important to me, no matter what the role is fairness, right? And how you treat people. So that for me is a critical value.
And I can attest to that because I've had my moments behind the scenes where I call you close to tears saying, I need your help. This is happening. And I can truly wear my heart on my sleeve and say, Sisi, you really walk what you're saying. You really, I've really experienced you in that light.
Thank you.
Now, in a demanding industry like finance, what practices keep you grounded and resilient?
I think a commitment to my clients and what's right for them. I think that for me is my guiding light, my true north. It can get very complex, but if you go back to, am I doing the right thing for my clients? Is this going to make things better for them? Is it worse for them? Or is it neutral? Right. I think those are the key things that sort of settle me or ground me in the work that I do.
Wow. So I'm passionate about women, and I know you are too. Women are still underrepresented, unfortunately. Yes. I mean, I think we've made some great strides, but you would attest to this, that we still underrepresented rather in leadership across financial services. What structural changes, in your personal view, are needed to shift this?
Oh, am I allowed to say that I don't know? I think the thing that I can agree with you on is that it is still a massive challenge, right? And the mind boggles for me because I reflect back on, I'm not going to give away my age, but some time back when I was in university, I think my class had an equal representation of men and women, and they were equally talented, men and women. And over time, that ratio has become skewed, right, as it relates to the number of women that you call it a table that sit at the table relative to the women that I sat with in the lecture hall.
Yeah.
And I guess it is a couple of things. It's just the way that our lives sort of evolve around us, and how in society the burden of childbearing and child rearing has always fallen squarely on women. And so I think that it is some of those societal things that are an obstacle or a barrier. I do think workplaces are accommodating women more and more, but I think there are some societal components. I think in parts of Europe, they have been able to better address the societal challenges as it relates to how they think about things like maternity and paternity leaves, and how they think about childcare and so forth. And so I do think that there are lessons that we could learn that sort of better level the playing field. I think some of society's own expectations are bizarre on this topic, and the behaviors of society. I mean, I'll tell you a story where consistently I've got small children and big children, many children, but I've noticed in all of the school-going years that the Mother's Day event or Mother's Day luncheons are in the middle of the workday, right?
Yeah.
They'll put them at like 10 or like randomly at like 1 or whatever the case is. But they're so good about the Father's Day's events, and those are at 7, right? Because they acknowledge that dads need to get to work. And so I do think that there are these things that sit and they create these structural biases or things in the subconscious that sometimes then create a pressure on women for women to consider exiting the workplace, right? So that they can fulfill better some of the roles that they have in their personal lives. So I do think that the stuff like that that needs addressing. And I guess then in the workplace, we must really consider deeply whether there are things that are biased in terms of the gender pay gap, right? It needs to be as lucrative for me to stay in my job as it is for my husband, right? And it shouldn't be when then we look at the numbers, the decision is so much more easy to lean towards, yeah, it should be you, right?
That's so
and
true.
for many times it ends up because the woman's take home is slightly less, the financial decision is that the woman must exit.
Yeah, that's so true. Sad but true. Now, this is a topic that's very close to my heart, mentorship. I don't think I'd be where I am if people didn't take a keen interest, men and females, across my career journey. And I know people often say mentorship is about guidance, but sponsorship is about opening doors. Now, what I've often also noticed is that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored, right? And both can make such a big difference in for young women trying to build their careers in finance as well as actuarial sciences. Sissy, how do you personally approach mentorship and sponsorship?
I agree with you. Too much mentoring, not enough sponsoring.
That's true.
And if I had to reflect on the thing that's made the biggest difference for me, it has been the sponsorship, where 1, 2, 3 people have been bold enough to stick their neck out and say, she's good. And they will be prepared to stake their reputation on the fact that I am good. So as it relates to women, make sure that you are good.
Yeah.
Right? And have people in your corner that will vouch for the fact that you are good. And also from a woman's perspective, I think, and I'm like this, I don't talk my story up enough, right? And
hence this podcast.
I'm not liking this, but we are here. So I mean, I would encourage more women to tell their stories more, such that people can tell their stories about them.
That's so true. We're nearly there.
Yes.
How do you bring inclusion, culture, and diversity into corporate decision making at Sanlam?
I think it happens at 2 levels, right? Is A, you bring around you the diversity that you're seeking. So make sure that your organization recruits and attracts people that are different from each other. I know it's comfortable to be around people that are like you, but that won't help as it relates to innovation, growth, difference, and relevance. Right. So you have to think about your organization in a way where you can attract a whole lot of different, diverse people. Right. And then the second level is, once you have them, they must feel safe to be their different, diverse selves. Right. And so I think it's quite important to create a workplace and to drive a culture where people can be who they are.
That's true.
When I first joined here, it was like I mentioned, during the pandemic, and so somehow my hair had grown because I couldn't get to a barber. And I had braided my own hair, and it was these like mohawk blonde braids. And I remember after my first sort of like big teams meeting with the Sanlam Corporate business, I had people sort of reach out and say, how can you be so brave to have hair like that at work? So they thought it was a little bit avant-garde, but I think I try to create a workplace, and I embrace people to show up as they are, and not to worry about things that are superficial.
That's so true. And lastly, a
Yeah,
wise woman. Yes, we're there, sis, we're there. And lastly, a wise woman once told me that as leaders, we cast a very long shadow.
Yes.
It's both the privilege and the burden of leadership.
Yeah.
As you reflect on your journey, past and future, what legacy of leadership do you hope to leave for Sanlam Corporate and for the next generation of African women leaders who look up to you?
Sure. A legacy is a tricky thing. So I haven't thought too much about that. I think more about the impact I have today. What people feel about me, how I make people feel. And I suppose in the context of today, I hope that people will say that I treat them fairly. I hope that they say that I'm consistent.
Yeah.
I hope that they say I live my life with integrity.
That's so true. And you do. You really, really do.
Thank you.
Kanyisa, it's been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you.
To have you here. Thank you for agreeing. And I know you've touched a lot of people's lives, especially the young women that are looking up to you. Ngiyabonga, sis.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this special Heritage Month of the Executive Leadership Magazine podcast. Thank you for joining us. I am your guest presenter, Oletilwe Ramashala. It's been an honor and a privilege. Until next time, remember to keep leading with purpose, breaking barriers, and leading boldly.